Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. We're now in public session. Just a reminder that the meeting's being broadcast online and throughout Parliament buildings. And so I'd just like to remind you to mute your phones and that no recording or photography of the meeting is allowed. So if members are content, I will proceed with the agenda. So in terms of apologies today, we have apologies from Philip Brett. Oh, there's Sinead's online too now. So Anya is joining us, and I think Pam will be joining too, so remotely. So I think we should have good numbers. Any declarations of interest to declare?
Yes, Chair. I have one in relation to Module 2 of the COVID inquiry, because I was in the Department for Communities covering for Deirdre Hargey from June 2020 until December 2020 during that period, and also attended the COVID inquiry.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Carol. Okay, I'm going to move on to Chairperson's business, and first item there is the consideration stage debate yesterday of the bill. So obviously it was a very tough day for the victims and survivors. I think some of them knew in advance of arriving at Parliament buildings, but regardless of when they found out, I think they all felt completely blindsided. Very, very upset about the fact that our committee amendment wasn't selected by the Speaker's office. I'm at a loss myself in terms of what this word procedural means in terms of the response from the Speaker's office. As far as I'm concerned, we worked with a representative from the Bill's office on this amendment in January. It was submitted to as an amendment in the end of January, I think, maybe early first week in February. It has been there ever since. As far as I'm concerned, it's well within the scope of the bill. It is within our legislative competency in this assembly, and there has been 3 or 4 months of an opportunity for people to come back and say that wording wouldn't be acceptable, that procedure wouldn't be acceptable, and yet we have not had the opportunity to have that engagement around this potential amendment. I find it very strange that some of the amendments that were chosen yesterday, as I said in my contribution, that strayed quite far into the law of intestacy, and also had the potential impact on infringements of European Convention of Human Rights, and yet we were allowed to debate those. So I have, just as to be open about it, I have submitted an amendment myself, in the name of myself and the Deputy Chair, and that would be to replace the words 29th of September 2011 with the words 1st of January 1996, and the justification would be that the last institution closed in 1995. I had a conversation with the chair of the consultative forum today, Marie Breen-Smith. I explained to her this is a placeholder. This is putting the Speaker's office and the Bill's office on notice that that this amendment is in. I have fully prepared to withdraw it, change it, work with this committee in terms of a new amendment, work with the Executive Office on a new amendment, work with the consultative forum and anybody else. I think we have to right the wrong around this, and I think that today we should really, I appreciate that Pam did contact the Assistant Clerk before the meeting to say that she would not be in a position to agree anything today. I fully respect that we all have our own political parties to engage with around this, but I do think that we should thrash this out a bit. We do have a bit of time because the Justice Bill will take a few plenary sessions to get through, but we don't have all the time in the world to sort this out. And just for those of you who are joining online, just to let you know that Stephen Orme is in the gallery, and if we want to maybe start looking at some technical issues, we will. I'll seek your permission to go into closed session. But I just wonder, do people want to say anything in public session before we get down into the finer details of this? And I'm going to go to the Deputy Chair first.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And can I just share with you the concern and distress that was very obvious when I spoke to some of the people yesterday that arose from the failure of the committees, and I agree with you, fully fledged and entitled amendment to the legislation not being accepted by the Speaker's office. I think we need to get a lot of advice and information about this, particularly when, my understanding is the words that the Speaker used were that he had received procedural advice in respect of his decision. I think we need to know where that procedural advice came from, who that procedural advice came from. Did any of that procedural advice come from the Bills Office? And if it did, then it would appear to be in conflict with the advice that we have received from the Bills Office in crafting the committee's amendment to the bill. And to that end, I believe that we should request the head of the Bills Office to appear in front of this committee to explain what he or she considers procedural advice to the Speaker to contain.
Thank you very much. So we'll take the suggestions, if that's okay, and then we'll put them to the committee after everybody's had an opportunity to speak. I'm going to go to Timothy first and then Sinead. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose disappointed, shocked would be how I would sum up and explain when I found out Monday that the posthumous date, the amendment to remove it, hadn't been selected. If you look at Standing Order 33.4, an amendment shall be out of order if it imposes or increases a charge on public revenue. I believe that is potentially what the Speaker has been looking at, which concerns me greatly. If that is the case, as I said yesterday, and I've said in committee, that this shouldn't be down to pounds, shillings and pence. This should be down to us taking forward the removal of the posthumous date on the basis of right or wrong, and we have a moral duty to make this bill the best bill that it can be. We've had a lot of buy-in from victims and survivors, and I can understand how disappointed and how let down they feel. Like I'm sure the rest of the committee received a large number of emails on the Monday night expressing their disappointment of where we've arrived to. I would be happy, Chair, to support your amendment. Obviously, you're not fixed on that date on the basis that open to work with other people and if there's other dates come forward. But I think what we do need to do is start to, if we have suggestions on potential dates, inform the Executive Office so they can start to work up costings, because I think this is why the amendment wasn't selected. I think this is all to do with money, and I think that's disappointing if that's the case, but we need to prepare the groundwork so when it does come back we're in a position to try and move another amendment to right the wrongs, because I feel it was a feeling of the passage of time yesterday that the bill moved on to the next stage with the posthumous date still in as originally drafted.
Thank you, Timothy. Sinead, please.
Thank you. I would agree with the sentiments expressed, and I think the disappointment among the victims and survivors was palpable. It wasn't a good start to a long day, but as I say, we are where we are now at this stage. It's how we rescue, if at all possible, and get in another date. I mean, there's no way we can submit the same date because that would just probably have the same result. So I do think that we have to select a date, and I realise that, Chair, you have that in holding, but if the committee were agreed collectively to submit an alternative date, and we can discuss the number of those, if at all possible. I think that it's incumbent upon us to do so as the clock is ticking, and it is imperative that we as a committee find out what advice the Speaker was given. I know he doesn't have to tell us, but there obviously was advice from either the Bills Office or from the department itself, from the senior civil servants that indicated that the posthumous date was a significant problem. Now, there was obviously a delegation that came to the committee and spoke about the dangers of the cost, etc., in relation to it. But we have to get to the bottom of it, because as a committee, we did our due diligence, and we did it with credibility, and we did it with as much transparency as possible. And when a collective of a committee come forward with amendments, they should be accepted. They should be accepted on the face that we did the groundwork as well. And we looked at alternatives, and these were the suggestions of the committee. Other than that, what's the point? What's the point of all these amendments coming out from a committee when the risk is that they don't even get submitted or onto the floor? So it is disappointing, but let's see what work we can do now, because we're good at putting our heads together.
Thank you. Sinead Carroll, please.
So, like everybody else, I was actually watching for the amendments come through at the weekend and seeing them on Saturday, and we all got the raft of emails and contacts. I agree with Sinead. I thought we can come together on your amendment. I'm going to have to discuss it with the party. And in fairness, yourself and Stuart made that clear. But just a clarification on a couple of things. So I'm saying this as the Principal Deputy Speaker. None of the Deputy Speakers, including myself, are in the room when the Speaker gets advice. So it's just to clear that up. Secondly, no department ever gives the Speaker advice on amendments. So it's just to say that as well, because that would be political interference. So so that's my view. I also think we did well, each of the parties, despite some of our differences, in setting a tone for people who are deeply, deeply traumatised. And I would like us to try and continue that despite some of our differences. I just felt when people are bringing, so my view is that when a Bill's office clears the amendments, then that's them cleared. They've met the bar and nobody else should have an opinion. It still comes back to us when we're bringing amendments forward, us as individuals, and in this case, us as a committee. But once it has gone through that threshold of making sure they're competent, then anything else after that appears to be political. And I believe a Speaker should not be political. They need to be completely independent. Going forward, I think there is an expectation. I mean, we felt some of the emotion yesterday, Stuart and I, from some of the people afterwards. Anya and I as well, when we went up to see them. We all were up and down at different stages. And to be fair, I got contacted by quite a few last night and this morning who appreciated the support that they got from individual committee members right across, so that's good. But I do think at some stage or other we're going to have to come back to this to try and find out. The questions have been asked and we need answers. And then for us going forward, what actually, first of all, what does the amendments mean that were made yesterday for the impact of the bill? Because some of the amendments that Jerry brought forward, I was concerned about.
Yes.
So I was concerned about those, and so, and you're, like, we're politicians, political activists. A lot of times during legislation, you have to really think on your feet and you just use your instinct and you just want to try and do the best for people. And we were all coming from that position. But I just would like more advice from the Bill's office about what we're putting forward and what the impact of each amendment would be. Because despite being here for nearly 20 years, parts of yesterday, when I instinctively thought that some of those amendments were outside of the scope of the bill. So that's the concern. And then how do we, as political representatives or members of each political party in this committee, articulate that to the people? But I'm still hopeful we'll try and get to a good place in this, because everybody, particularly the survivors and victims, have just came so far for so long. So that's it.
I suppose just before I bring other members in and welcome on you, I think that possibly taken from what you've just said there, Carol, there were some amendments that went through yesterday, and I think that there will need a wee bit of technical tidying up. So I wonder if one of the potential actions of this would be to get the Executive Office officials back as soon as possible to talk through those. Is that down? We can put that note after.
Yeah.
Claire, I'm going to bring you in next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, like, I haven't had much input to this bill just due to a long absence and illness, and I probably don't intend to have too much input because I haven't really had an opportunity to consider it in the way that the committee has. But I think just to say that I have been keeping in touch with it, and I've been speaking with the various people just at home. And look, if there's anything that we can do at this stage, I don't know the ins and outs of why the decision was made not to take the amendments, but I do think there's an opportunity, you know, even at the minimum, to submit the amendment, and I'm happy to support, you know, what you and Stuart are proposing in relation to that, and you know, if we need to edit and fix that, but I think just as a minimum to show that this committee still supports, you know, what we had listened to, and you know, what's right with that. So it's really just to put on record my own kind of contribution to it, or lack of, but you know, really to support those moving forward.
Thank you, Claire. No, we fully understand, and it's good that you're back fully fledged into the committee again. Pam, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. No, sorry, apologies. I had difficulty getting on initially there. So I was a minute or two late. I just want to confirm, are we in open session or closed session?
We are in open session. I'm just giving members an opportunity to say things publicly. I've explained there that Stephen Orme is in the gallery. We will go into closed session shortly and talk about some finer details, but I just thought for transparency that I think I want to allow everybody an opportunity just to have one contribution, and then we'll go into closed session. Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, and where are we on the agenda?
So we're still under
Business.
Chairperson's business.
Okay, I do think, and I know, thank you to the clerk, we got some communications which I haven't had time to go through yet, but only within the half an hour of the meeting time. So, and given where we are, I just think this should have been an agended item. And clearly, yes, you've alluded to the fact that I've already indicated that, you know, I'm one person from a party, and I cannot be making decisions on the hoof on an agended item. So I do think we need to be careful and we need to be sensitive. And I'm just very aware that the Speaker's rules, very aware of it. I certainly wouldn't want to be accused of challenging the Speaker. So I think we should all be aware of that. But I would like to go into closed session to discuss it further, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay, so just before Timothy, have you something small? Because I'm conscious that we do want to go into closed session.
Yeah, there's 2 quick points.
Go ahead, please, and then I'll save on.
First point was I just think that we should put it on record about Jerry Carroll's amendments that were passed yesterday. Some of them were very good, excellent. Some of them I did have concerns and didn't vote with, but I think it needs to be noted. There's obviously put a considerable amount of work in to getting some of them through. I think at this stage, his Amendment 30 does need a bit of tidying up, and I think this committee should reach out to him and try and work with to get a form of words that nails that down, that the small group of people that they're maybe born in an institution and then had their baby in an institution is the only ones that will qualify under that. So that Amendment 30 does need tidying up, does need tightening up, and I'm glad he moved it yesterday on the basis, because you can't be sure that if it wasn't moved yesterday that it would be included in the consideration stage. But I think we should be proactively contacting Jerry to try and do some work around that amendment, to support that amendment now has been passed, to get it down to that it's only that small group of people that we heard from that would be able to qualify under that Amendment 30 that was moved and passed by the House yesterday.
Okay, so Anya, is there anything you'd like to contribute in open session, or
not at the minute, Chair? Obviously, I come in.
No problem.
Chair, just very briefly,
Okay.
just to follow what Timothy has said and what Carol said, and it's a general point with regards to any bill, and that is where members who are not a member of a committee bring forward amendments. I don't want to be critical of what Jerry Carroll did, because there's merit in the amendments that he brought forward, but it would have been exceptionally useful if he could have either written to the committee to give us a little background to the reasoning for that. And it might be useful that in terms of assembly procedures, that issue be noted, and that as a courtesy, members who wish to bring forward amendments to bills could, particularly bill amendments, which committees by and large might think are appropriate and useful, that there be some mechanism to engage with the committee, either in writing or a very quick session, just to say, look, I'm bringing you this amendment and this is why.
Okay, no problem. I think that's a procedural thing. So look, I'm going to move in a public session, but I do think this point needs to be made in in private session. This needs to be made in public session. Nobody that I have heard so far, Pam, has in any way tried to challenge the Speaker's ruling from yesterday. What we're trying to do is salvage this situation. And I don't
Great.
think anybody was trying to challenge that. So I think we'll go into closed session, please. And I'm going to invite Stephen to come forward, please. Thank you.
Committee Room 30. Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 Sound.
Okay, members, we're back in public session. We've just had an opportunity to speak to Stephen Oram from the Bills Office about yesterday's consideration stage in the Assembly Chamber. We talked about the amendment that wasn't accepted by the Speaker, but we also talked about the other amendments that did pass and that we did vote through in the course of the debate. I'm just wondering, Clark, couldn't you maybe read through our actions and we can maybe put them, I think, are we all in agreement with them, or do you want me to put them to the vote? If you want to go through them one at a time, then we can maybe...
Our actions were that we write to the department seeking information on the implications of the amendments that were made at yesterday's debate, that we seek financial information from the department on the alternative dates for the posthumous date across different years. So what the implications would be of that financially, and also the financial implications in relation to increasing the amount of the payment from £10,000 to £12,000. It was also agreed that if we put on record that Mr. Carroll's amendments that were taken through yesterday were extremely useful, and that the committee would work with Mr. Carroll to refine that recommendation, and also that officials in TEO should be asked to work with Mr. Carroll on that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everything.
Yeah, and Chair, for us, I know you said about the implications, but even if it means that even though Jerry's amendment was passed yesterday, that if the implications are that it is outside the scope and we may need to amend it, what advice we will need
Yes.
that doesn't unpick.
Yeah.
So as we were advised, you can't go lower, you can't go above, you have to stick.
Yeah.
So what else you would do? Because I'm still not really clear about that.
So I suppose in the first instance we need to find out if the Executive Office officials are planning to make technical amendments
Yes.
at further consideration stage, and if not, then that's possibly something for us to look
Yes,
at.
fair enough.
Okay, Sinead, are you looking back in?
Oh, well, no, just in relation to the cost of from the 10 to the 12, I mean, the department themselves clearly said yesterday, or the junior minister, it's 4.5 million per thousand. So we actually know that the cost of that is in their own documents.
Okay.
So we kind of know that piece. And then in relation to the Amendment 30 as well, I mean, you could put in a cap on that as well, up to the sum of, or to the value of, if we so desired, which would be different from what is stated in the actual amendment. So would that be competent?
Sinead, Stephen has left the room, I think, at this
Oh,
stage.
sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. We'll say we're in public session now, and I suppose what we need to do is write quickly for all those pieces of information, make the invitation to the departmental officials to possibly come back next week if they can and talk to us about the potential technical amendments. So we've agreed that because this was not an agenda item, that we all have political parties that we represent, apart from Clare's an independent, but that we're not taking any decisions today, and so I think once we have fuller facts in front of us, Sinead and anybody watching online, then we will make a decision about our next steps, but all conscious that we only have a few weeks before further consideration stage.
Sorry, when's the date for? Is that to be set by the Speaker?
Yes, I think
Usually, what, 6 weeks?
No, she's usually 3, is it?
3 weeks, aye. 3.
But I think because the Justice Bill will require a few sitting days, that we might be in luck and we might have 4, but it's literally only a matter of weeks before we will have to have an amendment, etc.
Yeah.
So we're quite tight for time, so that's why I'm saying if we can move it at pace, and I know the committee team will do that today.
Through the chair, if I could
Yes.
just mention, and we will try and schedule it for next week, but if it's possible to get it alongside our normal meeting, we may need to schedule an additional meeting, or we could attach it to the briefing that we have on the 3rd of June in relation to the regs that are coming out of this bill. But we'll liaise with officials and department to get them up as soon as we can.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I think that under the circumstances, I'm sure most members would be able to make themselves available for a specific meeting on this, but thank you in advance for that. Members, I just have a couple more things to read into the record, and that's that on pages 6 to 7 of the table pack, there's some correspondence from an individual expressing their concern about the impact of the exclusion of this amendment that it will have on victims and survivors. So as we all have received, not just from this individual via the committee, but personally, so just want to acknowledge and thank everybody who has reached out to us, not just in the last week or so, but over the course of our deliberations of the bill, because it really has helped focus our mind on what is important. Okay, members, so I'm going to move on then to 3.1 of the Chair's businesses, the interfaith clerical abuse survivors. The meeting, I'm going to refer you to pages 6 to 12 of the pack, and just to advise that I've received correspondence from the interfaith Clerical Abuse Survivors Group, and I'm going to call them ICAS from now on, following their meeting with junior ministers on the 30th of April of this year. Survivors who attended that meeting feel that the meeting was unsatisfactory. Members will be aware that the Executive Office's research and recommendations regarding historical clerical childhood abuse have yet to be published, despite repeated efforts by ICAS and the committee and other individual survivors. In the correspondence, survivors outlined that ministers were still not in a position to update those present. That what was discussed and agreed in the area of this meeting, and a note of the areas discussed during the meeting have also been provided by ICAS. So just to remind that the committee wrote to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister on the 24th of April this year requesting that they keep the committee updated on the outcomes of this meeting and highlighting the need to re-establish or reappoint a chair for the interdepartmental working group or something in that space to provide an advocacy role for the victims and survivors. The committee also wrote again to the department on the 1st of May to repeat its request that the research and recommendations are shared with the committee. The response to this most recent correspondence can be found on pages 3 to 4 of the table pack. And just to recap then, the department's position regarding publishing the reports remains the same. The research was commissioned to build evidence, improve understanding and inform ministers' decision making, not specifically for publication. However, there are no principled objections to publishing the reports at the appropriate point, and they will be shared with the committee at the earliest opportunity. So I'm going to seek your agreement to write to the First and Deputy First Minister to ask that, in line with ICAS's request, a meeting is arranged in the coming weeks to discuss the Executive Office's research and recommendations, as well as a need to re-establish a constructive working relationship to progress this area of work. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, just on that, Chair, I note that they say that the reports will be published at an appropriate point. So when we are writing to them, can we establish what that appropriate point is? Because it's a very bland, very grey area, and it could mean any point in time. So I think we need to nail that down of when they think it would be appropriate to share them reports with committee.
Okay, noted. Have we agreed with that? Yeah. Okay, and then just another suggestion then is to write to the department to request that historical clerical childhood abuse is a topic discussed with the committee when ministers come before us next. And I know we agreed at the strategic planning day that we would advise the First and Deputy First Ministers that we will be asking them on a range of topics, but just to highlight that this is one that's very much on our radar at the minute. Okay, on a related matter, 3.2 Northern Ireland Survival Council report, I'm going to refer you to pages 13 to 86 of the pack, and just to advise that the Northern Ireland Survival Council has published a report called Nothing About Us, Expert Survivor Insights, a thematic analysis of lived experience testimony from Northern Ireland victims and survivors of childhood sexual abuse. The report explored experiences from 4 points in the journey: pre-disclosure, disclosure, engagement with the criminal justice system and interaction with support services. The Northern Ireland Survival Council is advocating for the establishment of a permanent survival council to ensure that survivor expertise is at the heart of policy making. So I'm going to seek your agreement to invite representatives from the Northern Ireland Survival Council to the committee to discuss its report and findings. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
I just want to put on record as well, I thought that it was an excellent piece of work, and I think that it will really help us inform our work. So thank you to the group for providing that to us. Okay, so 3.3, Concern Worldwide invitation. We're going to refer you to pages 87 to 88 of the pack. And just to advise that I've received correspondence from Concern Worldwide inviting me as chair to meet with students from their summer academy who will be visiting Parliament buildings on Wednesday, the 10th of June 2026, and I've been invited to speak with the students about my role as chairperson, but also the work of the committee and the importance of the current inquiry and redress scheme bill. So just seek your agreement that I attend this informal meeting.
Agreed.
Okay, moving on then. Item 4, draft minutes. You'll find the draft minutes from our meeting on Wednesday the 13th of May 2026 on pages 90 to 94 of the pack. Just going to check if everybody's content that these minutes are a true reflection of proceedings. Agreed? Okay.
Agreed.
Matters arising then. So just to advise members that following last week's meeting, when we were advised that as matters related to the judgment in the Dillon case handed down on the 6th of May are now before the High Court, it would not be possible at this time to have further discussion in relation to the Supreme Court's judgment in respect of Article 2 of the Windsor Framework and the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2023. officials have delved into this issue, and it appears that the case is listed for case management review, but no hearing date has been scheduled. For this reason, members now have a short window in which to discuss issues ahead of our meeting with the Equality Commission, which is provisionally scheduled for the 24th of June. So it should be noted that once the case management hearing has taken place and the hearing date for the cases has been set, that will be when proceedings will be active for sub judice purposes at the High Court. So the implications are that the scheduled briefing with the Equality Commission in June may take place during a sub judice period. However, this should not prevent the meeting going ahead if members wish, and our legal team are happy to offer advice should the committee require it. So a couple of other points that will bring others in. So just to advise that rather than discuss the issues today without members having had time to prepare for this discussion, it is proposed that the matter be scheduled for next week's meeting so that the committee can consider the issues that will be discussed later with the Equality Commission. And just to advise that with members' agreement, legal services will be asked to attend that session should we agree to it to provide advice. So does anybody have any thoughts on this, or are you content to schedule this discussion for next week with the support of legal services?
Yeah, next week, yeah, 100%.
Good stuff. So 5.1 Strategic Priorities Agreed Work Programme. I'm going to refer you to pages 101 to 138 of the pack, and just to remind the committee agreed the actions from the strategic planning meeting on Wednesday the 4th of May, and following that the Assistant Clerk updated the strategic priorities and proposed programme of work to reflect the agreed changes, and the committee has agreed 11 areas of work that it wishes to give priority and focus to between now and the end of the Assembly mandate in 2027. So I'm going to ask you to note this item, and just to thank the Assistant Clerk for her work on this. I think you said this morning they were pretty much booked up right through till the end of the mandate, so there's not going to be much room for many more briefings added on. Go ahead, please.
It's just, we all raised, most of us raised the issue around the race relations order and where it's sitting.
Yes.
I still think I would like to hear, because I mean it just looks like it's being stopped, it's being blocked. I mean, I don't even like the term race relations. It should be racial equality, in my opinion, because it kind of indicates that there's, problems that undermines the severity of the problems. However, would it be possible to get somebody from CAJ in to talk about the lack of that order? Because while the framework's out for consultation, an order is based on regulation and legislation, and in absence of that can end the next mandate without a robust explanation of why that is, I'm really uncomfortable with.
Well, thank you. I'm just wondering then, so we have, what date do we have the two panels up about the consultation on the...
That's the 27th, yeah.
I wonder, is there room, scope to actually include an extra witness to that session? I know it's blending a little bit, but we've sort of cornered that day just for this subject matter. So I wonder if that may be a possibility.
Chair, if you, Carol, just to say that there's two organisations that have declined the invitation to come next week in terms of the panel session, so we could fit CAJ.
I know, I don't mean to bounce it, and I know, like, if we're all honest, sometimes by the time you get to Fort Worth programme, you're just kind of, sorry, Sarah. But I did see it and kind of thought to myself, oh, we're missing out on a bit of expertise in this.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, thank you.
If we can maybe try it. If not, then we'll see.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
Later stage, but I think there's an opportunity there. Yep. Any other items on this? No, thank you. But just to remind that the committee team have written to the Executive Office to ask for an update on this and to see what the actual blockage is, so we haven't received a response yet. Okay, 5.2 Victims Payment Board, the evidence session. I'm going to refer you to pages 8 to 9 of the table pack, and just to advise that the President of the Victims Payment Board has written to the committee following the oral evidence session at last week's meeting, and I'm just going to suggest that the committee moves into closed session to discuss this letter and agree next steps, as there are some data protection issues there. So have we agreed to go into closed session?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Committee Room 30, signed. Committee Room 30, signed. Committee Room 30, signed. Committee Room 30, Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, Sound.
Okay, thank you. Members, we're back in public session then. Just we went through some of the procedural issues in relation to the receipt of complaints as a committee. So what we have agreed is that we are going to write back to Mr Justice McAlinden to acknowledge his letter and also to set out how complaints can be made for such instances to the in relation to potential contraventions of members' code of conduct in terms of addressing them to the Commissioner for Standards. Okay, we were agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so we're moving on then. Item 6, oral briefing. So this is in relation to the response to Module 2 of the COVID inquiry, and we have departmental officials coming before us today. So I'm going to seek your agreement for Hansard to produce a report of the oral evidence session. Are we agreed? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to refer you to pages 140 to 143 of the pack for the clerk's brief and 144 to 149 of the pack for a copy of the written briefing. Okay, so welcome ladies. So welcoming to the meeting we have Jane Holmes, who's the Director of the COVID Strategy and Inquiry at the Executive Office, and Maria Hannon, who is the Head of Branch at the COVID Strategy and Inquiry, again at the Executive Office. So thank you very much ladies, you're very welcome to committee. We have, as you see, 4 people online. We're a wee bit light in numbers in the room, but we've all received your submissions and are thankful for them. So I'm just going to invite one of you to go ahead and make some opening remarks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll go ahead if that's okay.
That's good. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide a briefing on the ongoing work in relation to implementation of recommendations that are arising from the 4 published UK-wide COVID-19 inquiry module reports. Members have received a written briefing as well as the executive published update reports for modules 1 and 2. So to make the best use of today's time, I'll keep this opening statement as short as possible so we've got time for questions and discussions. So as you've said, with me is Maria Hannon, and she is Head of COVID Strategy and Inquiry Branch. So TEO has provided evidence for 7 of the 10 COVID-19 inquiry modules, and I'm sure you appreciate this was really quite a significant undertaking for the department. In relation to the module reports and recommendations, the recommendations that we've received so far have in the main been pitched at a UK-wide level, but our focus is on implementing what's going to make a difference here. You'll also be aware that a number of the recommendations contained in the Module 2 report are specific to here, and this is a reflection of our specific and unique constitutional arrangements. A cross-departmental modular steering group, which is made up of representatives of all 9 of the Northern Ireland civil departments, was established in October 24, and its aim is to progress consideration of the recommendations that are set out in the modular reports. So this group provides civil service-wide strategic oversight, coordination and assurance on the implementation of the UK-wide COVID-19 inquiry recommendations and maintains oversight of stakeholder engagement activities. The COVID pandemic, as you'll know, and in particular Module 1 of the inquiry, shone a light on civil contingency arrangements across the UK and highlighted where improvement was needed to better meet the needs of citizens here. So since it was published, the progress has been made to strengthen civil contingency arrangements, and this has been informed directly by the pandemic and by the COVID-19 inquiry. And in terms of executive updates for Module 1, the Executive has published 3 update reports, the most recent being in January 26. There are 19 recommendations in the Module 2 report, and as I've said, some of these are specific to here. The Executive published its initial response in March, and it highlighted that the recommendations reflect our unique constitutional arrangements and the distribution of roles and responsibilities within the devolved institutions. And as we consider next steps on those recommendations, it's important that we continue to factor in those constitutional and financial considerations. The reports for Module 3, which focused on the impact of the pandemic on healthcare systems, and Module 4 on vaccines and therapeutics, were published on the 19th of March and the 16th of April, respectively. Regarding future publications, the Module 5 report on procurement of key healthcare related equipment is scheduled to be published on the 14th of July, and the Chair of the inquiry has indicated that the remaining modular reports will be published throughout the remainder of 2026 and into 2027. For your information, streamlined reporting arrangements across all published modular reports are in place, and these provide for the publication of executive updates in May and November each year. The work of the cross-departmental group also includes a workstream on stakeholder engagements, as we recognise that the views of those directly impacted by the pandemic are essential in informing the actions taken in response to the recommendation. There has been ongoing engagement with the Northern Ireland Bereaved Families for Justice, most recently with First Minister and Deputy First Minister on the 14th of April. Officials are also in the process of progressing targeted stakeholder engagement on specific modules and recommendations to ensure that wider views are considered. So given the modular nature of the inquiry, we're of course happy to provide further updates as we progress actions in response to the recommendations from modules 1 to 4 and as future reports are published.
Okay, thank you. Are you content? Are you going to make any comments at this stage?
No, thanks.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much again for coming today. So I suppose what jumps out at me, first of all, is in Module 2, it says in the submission there that 15 of the 19 recommendations are complete, and that there's the 4 that are still under consideration. And when I look at those there, I think that these are probably the most important in terms of going forward. You know, the amendment to the Ministerial Code in Northern Ireland, delegated powers in Northern Ireland in an emergency, placing child rights impact assessments on a statutory footing, and implementing a socio-economic duty. So just wonder, can you maybe speak to those in terms of where they are? Very conscious that we've only about 10 or whatever months left of this mandate, so just wonder, could you speak to what's happening with those 4 outstanding areas?
Yes, so we have, so there's 15, as you said, of the 19 recommendations from Module 2 have been accepted, and those other 4 do remain under consideration. So we have recommendation 6, which was the social economic duty input on a statutory basis. So that is, as you said, one that remains under consideration. There's a lot of activity ongoing in relation to that. So there's ongoing engagement with the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland, and this has actually highlighted the potential benefits as well as complexities of introducing a social economic duty. Officials are engaging with counterparts in other jurisdictions just to understand existing and engaging approaches that are ongoing at the moment in those jurisdictions. What the engagement has highlighted so far is the difficulties or the issues around the definition of a socioeconomic disadvantage and the development of effective monitoring and measurement frameworks. So that work is ongoing. And officials are also considering the extent to which frameworks, existing frameworks such as Section 75 duties, can go to meeting some of the requirements under this this recommendation, and that is alongside the potential for further legislative change. So that's work that's ongoing at the moment in relation to that, and advice will be coming up to ministers in due course.
Okay, so we haven't touched upon the other bits, but I do want to maybe pause at these issues around socio-economic duty and also the child's rights impact. So as we know, this legislature has not been great at actually passing any equality legislation or very much legislation in the space at all. So I'm just wondering, is there a wider conversation taking place around how we can because we don't have a single Equality Act here in Northern Ireland and other parts of the UK does, I'm sure it'd probably be easier for some of this stuff to be implemented and put on a statutory footing. And I'm just wondering what format any such legislation would take in terms of these discussions. If you're saying they're under active consideration, what sort of vehicle will they be used? Will be used to sort of take these forward?
I don't have that information to date at the moment. I don't know what's happening in direct response to the recommendations, but we can find out for you if that would be helpful.
No problem at all. We're not trying to trick you here. I'm just trying to
understand
what you mean in terms of putting things in a statutory footing. Okay, so I'm going to move on then, and we'll maybe write to you after about just to get a wee bit of an update on that in terms of those 4 modules. So the cross-modular steering group. So I'm just wondering, is there like an actual action plan, like timescales, responsibilities, and I know you've talked about reporting mechanisms there, but like, have you got like this overarching action plan that all the departments are working to, that you've all signed up to, and you're all heading in the same direction with?
There's the action plans that are set out there's a Module 1 action plan that's attached to the updates that have been published and by the executive to date, and that is being pulled together with an action plan that's been developed for Module 2. We've done one response for that, and it set out in principle the actions that are being taken in the narrative, and an action plan is being developed at the moment, and the same is being done for 3 and 4. So those are being pulled together into one consolidated action plan that the departments are working to. But in terms of the ongoing work and where it sits at the moment, all departments have fed into that, and that's done through the cross-modular steering group.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how often does that meet? And is it a band of the willing, or is this the sort of area that everybody's been tapped on the shoulder until they're now in another steering group?
Well, it's because of the different issues that are engaged. There's all the departments are involved. Depends on the recommendations, but there tends to be a lead for each department who taps into each department and attends regularly. We aim to have meetings every month. Sometimes it's more often when we're leading up to getting a publication agreed, and sometimes depending on the time of the year, etc. So we try and meet once a month when it's possible. We have another meeting scheduled for next week, and it's we have people who know what's happening, each of the recommendations. They bring people along with them, depending on what's being discussed each one, or they are tapped into the departments and can speak on behalf of their departments. So it's very good engagement, positive engagement on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so I have 2 questions here, but I think they're probably the same space. So in terms of the work, and I know that these reports haven't, the inquiry hasn't reported that long ago in terms of its recommendations, but, are there any tangible, concrete outcomes from this work that the general public watching on could say, actually, we now can see that there would be a difference, that the departments would be more responsive and more fit for purpose to deal with another pandemic or another emergency situation?
Yes.
Do you want to speak to any of those, just put it into terms that people might really grasp and understand?
Well, I think the civil contingencies framework, that's one example. It actually cuts across work that's ongoing on it at the moment. It's being given a review. It was due a review anyway, but it's been reviewed in light of the modular recommendations and indeed Exercise Pegasus that Maria was involved in. Yeah. So it's ongoing a review at the moment, and it will hopefully be publishing an update by the end of the calendar year. The review of the Civil Contingencies Act, which was also due to take place, it is ongoing. I think there's a public call for information which is going to be published in June through to July this year, so next month it should issue, with a view to having changes made for it, and for us in particular that will hopefully result in changes in first responder organisations.
Okay, so we're still pretty much at the review stage. Like, there's not like a new data sharing system that would introduce a new computer system across government departments or anything like that. So it's still at that sort of planning, responding
So in terms, well, I suppose in terms of the recommendations, we are, for Module 1, there were 10 recommendations and we've closed one already. That was in the risk register. That was closed in January. And then we're moving to close, hopefully, 4 further recommendations because that's where actions have been implemented and they're moving into business as usual for taking forward. Potentially for Module 2, we, for example, the role of the Chief Medical Officer, which was recommendation 1 in Module 2, there's been a lot of work on that. I think there's still some options coming forward for streamlining those even further, but those changes have been made. And then some of the attendance at SAGE meetings, for example, we now have our Chief Scientific and Technical Advisor attends those. So there are tangible differences, whether or not the public can see those actually happening, but in terms of, so.
Okay, so the last one for me is really about that issue around the engagement, around people who've been bereaved through COVID, people who are living with long COVID, etc. I'm just wondering if you could speak to, I know you'd said there had been a meeting in April, as recently as April this year, which was great, but, you know, what format are they taking? Is that advisory or, you know, how do they, again, feel that they're being heard and that their voices are actually making a difference in terms of the implementation of the recommendations?
So the main engagement has been with the NI bereaved families, and it's been very proactive. We meet with them regularly. We usually try and do in-person meetings, and they also will provide written submissions for us to consider. They gave us detailed written submissions in response to Module 2, which was very helpful in helping us shape things for the response to the Module 2 in March, but as well as going forward. They've had 3 meetings with First Minister and Deputy First Minister, which I think they found very helpful. And I know they met more recently with the Minister for Health. So the engagement is ongoing and we're moving now. We've got multiple modules reported and there's more to come. We're in discussion with them on how they want to handle that because it's very time consuming. They have day jobs like everybody else. So we're trying to make it. So we're working with them to make that as workable as possible for them, to make sure their views continue to be held.
Thank you so much. I'm going to Deputy Chair, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for in a sense, reminding us of COVID and where we were at that time and where we're doing now in terms of the public review of all of that that flows out from the inquiry. Perhaps one general question and just follow up what the Chair was asking just about in terms of the practical implementation of recommendations that have come forward. Today, how fit do you believe we are to deal with a future either COVID or similar type of pandemic? And if many of the recommendations haven't actually been implemented, how quickly could we deal with that should we be faced with a future pandemic in the next week?
I'll maybe ask Maria to come in on Exercise Pegasus. It was 3 anchor days were held over the autumn, and then there's a future anchor day to be held, and it was designed to test exactly that, how better prepared we are for a response. Maria was directly involved.
So Exercise Pegasus was a UK-wide pandemic preparedness exercise designed to test and strengthen arrangements for responding to a future pandemic. All departments here, coordinated by the Executive Office, working alongside Department of Health, participated fully alongside the UK Government and other devolved administrations. The exercise provided an important opportunity to test decision making, coordination and information sharing across departments across the 4 nations. The learning captured from the exercise is being used to inform collective consideration of a pandemic preparedness and to strengthen future resilience. Being directly involved, we've seen the whole 9 departments pulling together. The executive met to consider the options and what restrictions would be put in place on each anchor day, and we have a further recovery session planned in June, and we are now looking at our evaluation of that exercise and an NI as well as a UK Pacific evaluation.
So has there been feedback from that exercise in terms of rating its success and its failures?
So all that material is now under consideration by the evaluation team, and there will be a report published in the autumn.
Thank you. So I guess we can draw from that we are potentially better placed to deal with a future similar or not similar event. and that at least there has been some testing done around that. The Chair made reference to a number of the equality issues that flow from various the modules that have been dealt with so far, and I listened recently to a conversation around the effect that COVID had on children particularly.
Yep.
How has that been discussed? Has that been discussed, for example, with the Department of Education and with the Department of Health, both in terms of mental health, but also how would we help children and young people in their learning journey rather than taking them out of their learning journey as we had to do during the pandemic? Or at least disrupt their learning journey if they weren't actually taken out of their learning journey.
I think that would relate directly to one of the recommendations that we've under on child rights impact assessments that we have said remains under consideration, but there is work ongoing on that as well, obviously. So there is a there's a group it's a monitoring and reporting group that the Department of Education oversees, and it has senior officials from all departments on it, which overlooks the implementation of Children's Young People strategy. And so the work of the Child's Right Impact Assessment to help assess the impact, obviously, of any policies going forward is due to meet again in autumn, and they will be taking a paper on this recommendation and how to make sure that child rights impact assessments are better used in the future and more embedded in policy making. So there is work, there's systems in place here for promoting their use, but they want to embed it even further. So that's work that's ongoing as well. So
while it's clearly important that we both deal with what Baroness Hallett is bringing forward, and that then you then start to unpack all of that to see what the practical on the ground implications are for it. Go back to our original question: how further fit is Northern Ireland to deal with the same or similar event if it were to happen sometime this year or next year? Have we learnt sufficiently, and are there now robust changes in place? Can you point to where we would do something differently?
Well, that would depend on the exact circumstances of a future emergency, and it has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not sure I can give you an answer to that one that you're maybe looking for. But
I appreciate
I'd say we're better informed, and there are changes being made to, as I said, the Civil Contingencies Framework for the decision making. We have a Department of Health Department of Health of Social Care published a new pandemic preparedness strategy in March, and that covers the whole of the UK. And part of that includes the development of the Northern Ireland Pandemic Concept of Operations, which helps inform all of those kinds of decisions. So that work is ongoing, but it's being taken forward through the. There's a group chaired by TEO and DOH on Cross-Departmental Pandemic Resilience Steering Group. They meet regularly, and that's work that's ongoing through that group to prepare for future events.
And I appreciate that while you might model for a same or similar style of event, something else could also happen as well, for which there's been no planning or thought process is given to. Just finally, Chair, one area that you mentioned, and it is important again to mention today, is your liaison with those people who either have long COVID or particularly the bereaved in respect of all of this. And I just want to be sure that their experience is continuing to help you learn about those things that we got right, and particularly those things that we got wrong. And that for the vast majority of the population, COVID is something that happened in the past, but there are many people in Northern Ireland for whom it's something they live with today.
Yeah, well, as I said, that engagement, particularly with the bereaved families, is ongoing. At the meeting with ministers on the 14th of April, they had an opportunity, and it was a very important opportunity, to recount their personal experiences firsthand. And there's no doubt that they were listened to. So this is work that's ongoing. I've actually reached out to them this morning to get the next meeting set up, because we know how important it is. And we're due to publish a consolidated update report on modules 1 and 2 in November, and we want to make sure that their views are fed into that. So that work is ongoing.
Can I just maybe add that there is a module on children and young people, module 8, so it will be published in 2027, the recommendations for it, if that's helpful.
That's useful. And we're just going again back to those who might be seen as either continuing to suffer from the effects of COVID or those for whom the impact was bereavement. We seem to be dealing with lots of not dissimilar issues in Northern Ireland. And I presume at some stage Baroness Hallett will have to deal with memorialisation and consideration of how we mark the event, the period of time that was COVID. Has there been any local thought given to that?
There's been a yearly commemoration event.
No, I
usually
appreciate
in March,
that.
yes.
But in order to ultimately, I don't want to use the word when the inquiry is closed and we look back, but when we come to that point in time, will there be something that will overarching or that will recognise the event that the world and the society and the United Kingdom went through?
Triggered by the inquiry?
Yes.
Well, potentially Module 10, which the hearings closed at the beginning of March, dealt with the impact of the pandemic on individuals. It's not a module that we were involved in at all. No governments were involved in that. It was purely done from the point of view of people who to recount their experiences of the impact that it actually had on them. So that report will be the last one likely to be published sometime in 2027, and it may well recommend something like that, but we haven't heard anything.
Do you see a facilitation role for you in any of that?
Well, potentially for the executive, yes, potentially.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Sinead, please, online. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for the papers you sent through. I just want to kind of tease out, like, the executive response repeatedly states that issues remain under consideration or require further work within the departments and other administration. Who actually holds the responsibility for driving that legislative change within the department? And within the departments, and what accountability mechanisms are there if there is no agreement?
So the legislative change for recommendation 6 in relation to the socio-economic duty will sit within TEO with the Equality Division, and they're the officials that are taking the work forward with the other jurisdictions and with the Equality Commissioner for Northern Ireland. In relation to the child's rights impact assessments, Department of Education has been working with us, but they obviously feel, well, they're correct that it's a next-wide issue, so they are leading it in terms of the children, young people strategy, and it's a vehicle through which that can go through, but all departments will obviously feed into that.
What happens if implementation stalls? That's what I'm trying to get at. Then who picks it up?
It'll be an executive decision once the necessary information has been brought forward to the executive, setting out the position and advice on that, and whether or not those recommendations are accepted in full. At the moment, they do remain under consideration, but that's pending further advice coming through from officials once the necessary research has been done, which is ongoing at the moment. So for the child's rights impact assessment, the recommendations 7 in relation to child's rights impact assessment, as Maria had said, the Module 8 report is due in 2027. It's most likely to have more to say on that and give more information. So in the meantime, the work is ongoing to make sure that we can implement the spirit of the recommendation, which is to make sure child rights impact assessments are further embedded into policy making, pending the publication of the report from Module 8.
I suppose, why I'm asking this, because it can take so long to kind of come to these decisions and move forward, and it seems the pace sometimes is very, very slow. But you look what's happening in the Congo. It's like the Ebola. That is a crisis that is happening in front of our eyes. I'm not saying that it's in danger of the pandemic moving here or anything at all like that, but I'm just saying these things happen, and the reason for these inquiries, and that is that we're ready quickly. And it just seems to be taking forever, and everything is under consideration. And I'm just wondering, is that a concern, or is that just the pace that things go at?
But it's not that nothing is happening. There is work going on in the background to make sure that when decisions are made, that they are the right decisions for here. So that does take some time, but there is progress being made in terms of making sure the right information is brought forward so the right decisions can be made.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sinead. I'm going to go to Anya, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to kind of focus on Module 2 and the recommendations from that, particularly in terms of recommendation 9 that's still under consideration. In your briefing, it is stated that there has been engagement with the AIR Committee just around some of the potential changes that may be required, albeit there were informal engagements. Could you possibly expand on what some of that engagement was with the committee?
It was a meeting with the committee clerk.
Yes.
And we're hopefully going to meet with the committee clerk again to take that forward. So this is obviously a recommendation that is not purely an administrative issue. It's very definitely a political issue that needs to be considered. So it's subject to those political connotations and potentially looking at the Good Friday Agreement going forward. So those are, and the Northern Ireland Act. So it's something I'd say, it'd be safe to say it's not something that would be, it remains under consideration whether or not it's accepted that those changes should be made, or again, one of those ones that's subject to ongoing advice coming forward from officials after we've spoken to all the right people. And it's not going to be, I would say it's not one that would be a quick fix because of the wider political connotations.
Yes, and obviously those engagements will continue with the clerk, with that committee in that context. When did you say you're meeting with the clerk again of that committee?
I haven't got one set up yet. We're working on that.
Just around, I suppose, civil contingencies, and we had the civil contingencies unit in a number of months ago. They were definitely in last year. Just to give us an update on some of the issues that they're working on. So from my point of view, not that I'm getting confused, but I want to understand the interface that you would have with civil contingencies, and then obviously there's the cross-modular steering group involved in all of that as well. Yeah.
So Colin Moffat, I think he and I appeared last year for this committee to give an update together. So Colin is head of civil contingencies. So there's some of the recommendations sit directly with him to implement, most of the Module 1 recommendations, for example, and some of the Module 2, and then he obviously has input to some of the other ones. So his work focuses purely on civil contingencies and making sure the structures are in place for that effective decision making. Whereas the work that we do is wider, it cuts across all of the modules of the inquiry and interfaces with the other departments. So we're the kind of coordinating body across departments for implementation of the recommendations, because there's very few sit within, or it would only impact one department. So we have to make sure all those views are taken on board. That's why we set up the cross-modular steering group, to make sure that all departments had an opportunity to provide input on any impact that it had on them, any way that they could help progress recommendations, and to make sure that Minister of the Executive are fully informed of what's ongoing.
Just in terms of the engagement with Colin and the team in civil contingencies, as well as the steering group, how often would the steering group meet? And then as well as that, do you engage monthly or anything like that with Colin and civil contingencies?
Steering group meets usually on a monthly basis when possible. Colin and I work very closely together. We're in the same directorate, and we would talk most days. So it's very much ongoing basis, and obviously across the other recommendations with the policy leads within TEO and other departments, we do talk regularly and try and discuss in between cross-modular steering group meetings, and so it's proactive, ongoing engagement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Anya. Timothy, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Good to see he's back in front of the committee again. Where I want to start with some of the questions that I have is regarding the readiness for a pandemic. obviously when we look back and we read the COVID inquiry, volume 1 of that, it states in paragraph 233 that Northern Ireland was more than 18 months behind the rest of the United Kingdom on sector resilience planning for pandemic flu, and that no work had commenced on it. So I want to take us back to January 2020. Was the ministers briefed at that time that no work had commenced? What was happening in the Executive Office? Who was indeed responsible for carrying out that work? I understand, yes, the Executive had been down for a period of time, but at the same time, just because there's no minister in place doesn't mean that critical work like this shouldn't be taking place. So what department was responsible, and what department, I suppose, was, fail, that we got ourselves to a place where we were 18 months behind the rest of the United Kingdom?
So in terms of back in March 2020, I think that the piece of work that you're referring to that was behind by 18 months was one specific piece in relation to vulnerable people, which is obviously very important. But I think it's important to focus on what's changed since then. The Civil Contingencies Division has expanded significantly since then. At that stage, it was headed by a Grade 7 head of branch. It now has Colin in place, who's a dedicated Grade 5. And he has built a very important and significant team around him to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And in terms of reporting to ministers and the executive, the Civil Contingencies Group, which has representatives from all departments at a senior level and all of the blue light organisations, they meet 3 times a year in June, November and March. And following each meeting, there is an update report that goes directly to the executive. So those reporting lines are in place. And I know that Colin's team has done a lot of work with ministers and permanent secretaries about bringing them up to speed on an ongoing basis with civil contingencies and measurements in place. And obviously, we'll refer again to Exercise Pegasus because it was a significant event. Those structures were all tested very robustly through Exercise Pegasus, and the report will be coming out of those from the learning, and that will feed into the review of the Civil Contingencies Framework and to reporting arrangements, etc. going forward. So there's been a lot of work has been ongoing to address the issues that were raised through the pandemic and through the COVID inquiry.
Yeah, so back in March 2020, what department was responsible that we are 18 months behind the rest of the UK?
Well, TEO had policy lead on behalf of departments for civil contingencies.
And do they still have it today?
Yes, that sits with Colin in the Civil Contingencies Division in TEO.
Yeah, so as it stands, that 18 months is no longer an issue. Colin's now in place.
Yeah.
And you're saying that we are up to date with the UK on responding to any pandemic that may arise?
Yes, so that engagement is very robust and ongoing as well across the 4 nations. I don't want to put Colin on the spot, but in terms of what happens on a day-to-day basis and how that's managed, he's much better placed to talk to you about that. But my assessment would be that civil contingencies is a very changed place than it was in March 2020.
So you mentioned about meeting monthly, and you'd also mentioned about having 3 meetings per year. Is there any ministerial involvement in that, or is it all at official level?
The Civil Contingencies Group meeting is all at official level. And then there are updates provided on following each meeting to the executive.
As a whole, so it's not just TO, it's the executive collective of all the ministers?
Yes, it goes to the executive.
Yeah, the inquiry concluded at paragraph 1182 that the degree of autonomy afforded to departmental ministers is not compatible with the effective management of a whole system civil emergency. Does the department hold that same view in that conclusion?
Well, the executive, so anything that's cross-cutting, as you know, goes to the executive, and that's where the civil contingencies updates go to the executive to ensure that there is a cross-cutting consideration of ongoing work and issues.
So obviously we have a different system of government here and operate mandatory coalition. Has that come up as an issue? Because it was obviously an issue that played out in the COVID pandemic.
Well, all I can say is that the system in place is for anything, as indeed civil contingency is a cross-cutting issue. It affects all departments, and they are all involved in the civil contingencies group, and that meets 3 times a year and produces the updates to the executive to make sure that there is cross-cutting consideration of any issues and ongoing work.
Yeah, moving on, so the inquiry found that paragraph 4116 that school closures had not been seriously contemplated in Northern Ireland prior to the Irish Republic's announcement on the 12th of March 2020. So my understanding is around that time where the executive met, there was no consideration given to school closures. Then we had the announcement in the south that they were going to implement school closures. We then had Michelle O'Neill in her capacity and her role at that time come out and broke away from the executive line of thought and said that we should implement school closures. What assessment has been done of political solo runs and essentially political alignment being given if there's a future pandemic?
That is probably possibly links in with the consideration for the recommendation on the ministerial code. So there is work ongoing at the moment to provide a draft of the ministerial code that ministers are expecting to have at some stage soon, hopefully. So that's work that's ongoing.
So that during the COVID inquiry, Michelle O'Neill accepted that she might have contributed to public confusion. So on that basis, you saying the ministerial code, if that is enacted and that comes in, that will be the barrier to ensure that that doesn't happen again, and the executive needs to act as a collective rather than people taking political positions on issues.
Yes, so updates to the ministerial code are being considered at the moment, and they will obviously be subject to ministerial agreement.
Yeah, so paragraph 9.128 states that there is no evidence politicians in Northern Ireland proactively sought SAGE or strategic intelligence group papers. Can you answer me why ministers did not proactively seek the scientific evidence being used to justify the restrictions that they were putting in place, and how have we learned from that come the next, if there is another lockdown, I trust there won't be, to ensure then that ministers are actually probing the advice they've been given?
So the advice from SAGE, the Chief Medical Officer attended those meetings, and he brought advice from those meetings to the executive, and the Department of Health brought papers forward as well. So that's how the advice from SAGE was brought to ministers during the pandemic. There is a recommendation in Module 2 about publishing technical advice and scientific advice, so that is one that is ongoing at the moment. It'll depend on the specific event at any given time and whether or not and how quickly that advice can be published, but that's being given consideration at the moment.
And just to add, the new Chief Scientific and Technical Advisor now holds regular 4 Nation CSA meetings and will attend SAGE from the outset of any future pandemic.
So what impact so when it came to the lockdown, it was all led by the health side of things, but there was no impact or no consideration given to the economic implications of the lockdown. So has there been anything put in place to ensure that if it gets to a stage where there is going to be a lockdown, that the economic devastation that will cost will be considered?
And there is a module specifically on the economic response, so that's module 9, and we will see what the recommendations to report will say there, I think specifically, if that's suitable.
And when will we see that?
That is due in the first half of 2027, that report.
And can you give me an assurance and some confidence that in future, as well as the health briefings the executive will get, they'll also get an economic impact of what that'll be?
Well, there was learning as we went through the pandemic, and there were economic briefings provided to the executive in the form of dashboard statistics and advice that came through from the Department for Economy through the executive task force that was established in December 2020, January 21. So that was learning that did come through, and then hopefully build on that when we see what the recommendations from Module 9 produce.
So was there papers that you're talking about that were being produced that sought to balance the health impacts, economic harms, educational harms, mental health harms and civil liberties that were impacted? Because there's no mention of that in the inquiry report. Is that the type of information that the executive was receiving?
There was a dashboard that was produced that contained socioeconomic data and economic data on it, and as well as the health data. And they were provided to the inquiry, and I believe, well, I think they've been published as well, so by the inquiry, so that information was considered.
So when Michelle O'Neill went on her solo run about closing schools, she would have had that information?
That information wasn't produced at that time in the pandemic.
When was it produced? When was that introduced?
We can check exactly for you, but it was later on as it developed, but we can check that out for you when the first report was produced, the first dashboard.
Yep. So on that basis, moving forward, this dashboard, will that information be made public? So when the government is telling us that there could be a lockdown, the members of the public will be able to see the impact that will have on the medical advice and the economic advice has all been taken into consideration. Because I have massive concerns here that what we're reading in the report is that the government ministers didn't even ask to probe the advice or to see the advice. They were just being led by the nose. I'm not challenging the information, essentially the CV of the people providing the information, but there has to be a balanced approach taken. I don't believe that, so UK, Northern Ireland anti-lockdown, and when you look back on it and see what the Scandinavian countries done, that there was no lockdown, that the lockdown, benefited us, it stopped the spread of COVID. Like, without this information being available and adding into the mix of the Bobby Story funeral, where there was politicians that just threw the rules in the bin for that day, because of their ideology leanings.
Timothy,
public confidence to go into or to listen to the government future, and any of this stuff has been shot to pieces.
Timothy, you're straying way off into political issues. The departmental officials are here to talk about the response. So I think, unless you've got another question, I think we'll draw this session to a close.
That'll do, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Timothy, and thank you very much, ladies. I think there were a couple of issues we did want to follow up on, but there was that question about the dashboard. Is that the dashboard that was publicly available, updated every day with the information? No?
No, it was a separate dashboard produced by the Executive COVID Task Force.
Okay, and is this going to be made public then?
I think the
part of the inquiry.
Okay, so
the inquiry has published those.
Can you send us a link then for Timothy then and for others for the committee?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, ladies. Good work and keep going. Very important work. Thank you. Yeah, so
recommendations.
Yeah, so will we recap on actions and then we will have a 5-minute comfort break. Would you like to go ahead, Clark?
Just 2 points really coming out of it. Firstly, that we receive an update from officials on the 4 outstanding recommendations to the module.
Okay, don't worry.
And the other point is the link to the dashboard and when that first dashboard was published. So
Yeah,
we
and a link
write
to it and
officials
stuff.
on that. Yeah.
Okay, Timothy, are you wanting to come in on this as a potential action? Go ahead.
Absolutely. Should this not be the sort of thing that the First and Deputy First Minister come in front of the committee to answer when we are having a briefing of this nature? Yes, I know they come periodically, but this should be a specific issue that they come on. In the module or volume 1 and 2 of the report, significant failings of the executive, and turn around and saying, oh, well, we need to look at where we're at now and disregarding what has happened in the past, I don't think is good enough. Ministers need to be held accountable and we need reassurance from them they are taking this seriously.
Well, that's fair enough. I suppose we've got the First and Deputy First Minister coming on the 3rd of July or 1st of July?
1st of July, Chair, still to be confirmed, but yes.
And as we've agreed, we are going to ask him to come for 90 minutes as opposed to the 60, and that we won't be setting an agenda in that. It will be an open process that people can ask whatever questions or areas they want. But as your suggestion that we would invite them separate to this in the hope that they would acquiesce? to?
Absolutely. Like, instead of the officials coming the next time, I think we need to hear from the First and Deputy First Minister on issues of this significance. Very, very important. Public need to have a confidence that what information they're being told indeed is reliable. And what I read in the report is that the executive ministers didn't even probe or ask for the background information in the reports. They just went on the word and the advice of somebody. And we've heard that that was the health advice at the beginning. It wasn't even the economic impacts of that health advice.
Okay, so there's a proposal from Timothy. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Carol, and I'll put that to the vote.
Yeah, I mean, First and Deputy First Minister come to committee, I have no issue. I have an issue with somebody who's going to, as I feel Timothy's a right to scrutinise, as we all do, but we're not rerunning this inquiry or any other one, so as long as we're clear. Yeah. The issue is there's massive lessons to be learnt. I've already declared my interest.
Yes.
Been on that executive for 6 months. But to say that people didn't probe is factually incorrect. So, because we're in public session, I want to get that on the record. And then, there's loads of issues that are really, really important. So, are we going to come back before that 1st of July meeting with an agenda of what questions we each of us want to ask? Or
We did try that before. It wasn't a popular one, really, in terms of letting them know in advance what we were going to ask. But I suppose I think it's a courtesy, and you get a more fulsome response if you do let them know where the area that you're really wanting answers. Otherwise, they might say, "Look, we'll write to you after." But
no, I mean I'm not suggesting that we give anybody forward notice.
Yeah,
I'm suggesting for ourselves, and then that people aren't, as long as the information is in relation to their department.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because we've had situations before where it hasn't been, and it's not very productive. So I'm just putting that on the record.
Well, we've heard that COVID, they are responsible for it. We've read the report. There's significant failings, and I believe because of the nature of them, that instead of officials presenting this information, that the First and Deputy First Minister should be doing it.
Okay, so we could maybe we agreed that we will write. We think that this is significant enough, and see if they can find another session for us on this. Okay. Right. Okay. Members, we're just going to take a 5-minute comfort break.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Thank you.
Committee Room 30, sound. 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 Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound.
Guys? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're back in public session. So we're going to move on to item 7, which is the retention and disposal schedule from the Executive Office. And just to remind, at last week's meeting, the committee agreed to defer consideration of the schedule until a response had been received from PRONI regarding the schedule changes. Just to advise that the response from PRONI can be found on pages 192 to 197 of the meeting pack. PRONI has provided further detail on why retention and disposal schedules are reviewed and updated, the rationale for retention periods and rationale for final disposal actions. So I'm just going to ask if anybody has any views in terms of that response from PRONI. No, it's all very clear. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to seek your agreement, members, just to the schedule and agree to send it to the Communities Committee for consideration. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to correspondence, and I'm going to refer you to pages 255 to 259 of the pack for the summary of committee correspondence, and just want to draw your attention to a number of items. So 8.4, head of the civil service, in terms of the bereaved payment. So again, I'm going to refer you to pages 282 to 285 of the meeting pack, and just to advise that the committee has received a response from the head of the civil service to the committee's correspondence of the 12th of February this year, seeking clarification on matters relating to advice published by the Commission for Victims and Survivors in December 2023 concerning services for bereaved individuals. Just to remind that the committee considered correspondence from the First and Deputy First Minister in relation to bereaved payments at its meeting on the 6th of May 2026. The committee then wrote to the department to ask that it keeps the committee updated on any outcomes to the meeting of the practitioners working group regarding options for further support for the bereaved. The committee also wrote to the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors to request sight of the advice paper to bereaved victims and survivors when this is updated. So I'm just going to ask you to note this. Okay, so 8.8, Independent Monitoring Authority for Citizens' Rights Agreements, and this is an invitation. So I'm going to refer you to pages 197 to 200 of the meeting pack, and just to advise that the committee has received correspondence from the Independent Monitoring Authority for the Citizens' Rights Agreement, and for the chairperson to meet with members of the board to discuss citizens' experience in Northern Ireland following Brexit, as well as the ongoing measures to safeguard their rights. So I'm going to ask you to note this item and to agree that we go ahead and arrange an informal meeting between the Chair and Deputy Chair in the first instance. Agreed?
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you. So Minister of Health, single central location for access to institutional records. I'm going to refer you to pages 297 to 306 of the pack, and just to advise that the committee has received a response from the Health Minister to the committee's correspondence of the 1st of May 2026 regarding access to records and the inquiry Mother and Baby Institutions, Michael and Laundries and Workhouses and Redress Scheme Bill. So just to seek your agreement to note this item and to write to the Minister to ask that as the redress scheme progresses in terms of design and implementation, that the committee is kept informed of the work of the trusts, including any emerging issues or common themes. Go ahead, please.
It's just on that issue. Well, I appreciate that the Minister just responded in a very factual way, but I still don't have any comfort that as soon as the redress scheme begins, that the access to records structures will be in place, and I would just like us to be a bit more, certainly to ask the Minister to address those concerns directly.
No, I agree with you, and I suppose I took a little bit of comfort yesterday from the Junior Minister Bunting when she addressed this issue in the debate. I think she was talking about closer liaison between the departmental officials and stuff. So
it didn't mean anything to me,
Did
Chair.
it
No,
not?
it didn't,
Okay.
honestly, because I have no doubt that they are closely liaison and they're watching us because the pressure, to be fair, is on TEO, but the pressure is on TEO on a responsibility that's not theirs.
Yeah,
So
okay.
getting access to those records remains to the Department of Health. And while the Minister has responded, I don't get any comfort at all that these arrangements are going to be in time for the redress scheme beginning.
Okay, so are we agreed in terms of Carol's suggestion there? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just 8.10, an individual wrote around the cost of home heating oil. I'm going to refer you to page 307 of the meeting pack. Just to advise that the committee has been copied into correspondence from an individual to the Secretary of State regarding the cost of home heating oil. Just to seek your agreement to note this item and agree to write back to the individual to outline that this area does not fall under the remit of the Executive Office and that they should address any concerns they have around home heating oil to the Economy Committee. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to note the following items of correspondence and ask the clerk to read them into the record. Thank you.
Okay, so item 8.3 and 8.5 are Hansard reports. Sorry.
You're okay.
Apologies, 8.2
Okay.
and 8.3 are Hansard reports. The first in relation to the introductory briefing from the TO Permanent Secretary on 6th of May, and the second from the TO retention and disposal schedule again 6th of May. Item 8.5 is correspondence from the Committee for Education to TO in relation to the Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. Item 8.6 is a TO response to correspondence of the 25th of February or 27th of February in relation to EU queries. And item 8.7, Minister of Health response to correspondence dated 24th of April in relation to the new Foundations pilot scheme.
Okay, does anybody want to comment on any of these items? No. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead then to item 9 and talk about the draft forward work programme, which you'll find on pages 309 to 311 of the pack, and I'm going to ask the Assistant Clerk to talk through any changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just in regards to next week, obviously we have our 2 stakeholder panel sessions and we'll also include CAJ. Carol?
Yeah, sorry, maybe it's probably more the Equality Coalition, because CAJ is one part of it, but there are others involved in terms of racial equality, so it's probably there. I don't know. Talk to Daniel Holder, he'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, he's very good. So we'll have those 2 panel sessions. Also, we've got departmental officials coming back to talk about the bill and further consideration stage, and also the briefing from the head of the bill's office. I was just chatting to the chair there in the break to say, in terms of the legal advice about the duty or judiciary issues, that we move that to the 3rd of June when we also have a Assembly Legal Services briefing on FOI, if members are content.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, be content?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, members, any other business? So unfortunately Pam has left the meeting, but I just wanted to note that she will be leaving this committee. She's going to be replaced by Deborah Erskine. So I just would like maybe the committee team to extend our thanks to her for her time and service on the committee, and we look forward to welcoming Deborah. So are you just going to reach out to Deborah then to maybe give her a bit of a briefing now during the week?
Yes, we have a new members pack and we'll work through that with her.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Any other business, members?
Just to put on record again, just thanks from the committee around preparation for the passage of Mother and Baby Bill. I know it's early days, but I mean, all the materials, having them in one spot was really helpful. So just to put that on the record.
Yeah, I know, very, very much agree with that. Thank you for raising it, Carol. Okay, so date, time and place next meeting. So next Wednesday, 27th of May at 2 p.m. in this room 30. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.